Ben needs to give you.
Yep, let me give a quick intro for Ben. Let me pull this up. Thank you, Ben, for providing this.
Yep.
Ben's going to be talking about Hotwiring and reCAPTCHA. And Ben is a recent graduate of Turing, and previously he did some interesting stuff around the oil and gas field, and he shares a sock drawer with his wife. Which is probably the most impressive.
Yeah.
So thank you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks.
You mute
Let me
yourself.
Mine is muted. Yep.
Okay, yeah, because it'll go through that and record.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Just yell on the call if you can't hear us or something. So if you share your screen, perfect.
All right. Everybody see that all right? Am I clear on the phone?
Yeah.
Alrighty, great. So I'm calling this presentation Hotwiring reCAPTCHA. So a quick overview of what it's about is integrating reCAPTCHA v3 into a Rails application with Hotwire and falling back to reCAPTCHA 2 upon v3 failures. So some of these processes may be known to members of the group. However, this is the first time that I had worked with it, work with Hotwire, Wicked Wizard, and reCAPTCHA, so it was all brand new stuff to me. This was quite the experience, and I'll talk a little bit about my learnings going through the process as well. And please excuse me if I use incorrect terminology. I'm an intern. So initial setup is very, API oriented. You just sign up for your keys. So in this situation, it was getting a V3 and a V2 key for the site. And then there's a really great gem by Ambethia to assist with the whole reCAPTCHA implementation. Super handy. The docs are really good, easy to get through. The one issue is it doesn't, reCAPTCHA and Turbo don't play nicely together. So there's kind of some workaround stuff that we had to go through to get it implemented. So
Ben?
Yes.
Could you does everyone know what reCAPTCHA is? Could you tell us that?
So reCAPTCHA, well here, yeah, I can just...
It's a Turing test, isn't it? Are you a robot?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah, it's the V2 version is the one where you sign up for something and then it sees if you're a robot and you have to check out the spotlights and the pictures, and you don't pass, it throws an error. And then V3 is actually just a little badge you'll notice on the bottom right-hand side of your browser window that does stuff in the background to see if you're a bot or not, which I don't know exactly how it works.
If your typing is too fast and steady, you're probably not human.
That's right.
I mean, there's
your mouse
100 things you can measure.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah. So yeah, that's a little bit about reCAPTCHA. So to render the badge, pretty straightforward here within a turbo frame tag called reCAPTCHAs. We just did the reCAPTCHA v3 and then did an action with the site key. So this action, from my understanding, is and if anybody knows any more about this, please speak up. But you can, if you have multiple reCAPTCHAs on your site, you can apply an action to it. So then you can gauge the performance of each portion of that reCAPTCHA. So in this situation, this was on the apply site. So then we can gauge how many times the apply reCAPTCHA is clicked and pass and fail and so on and so forth. Whereas in another part of the application, if we have a different reCAPTCHA, we can measure that as well to see kind of where bots are going and such, which is kind of handy. And then the next thing is because we have to tie it in for error handling and such, you have to tie it into the model that you're working with. So we made a quick validate inside of our model with an adder accessor, and with the errors, we did an error add. So we created an error through the reCAPTCHA with the model through the reCAPTCHA valid, which we'll see on the next slide here. So inside the controller now, you can do a validate reCAPTCHA. We created a private method here to check the validity of it, and you can put different parameters in here so you can see the associations that we did here with we made it at the model with that same action, and then you see that minimum score there, so you can set your own parameter on how tight you want that reCAPTCHA to be. And then if you basically go to 1.0, you will never pass it. So that's how we did our kind of error checking and handling, is you just up that to 1.0, and then you can surf around your browser to see what happens and see how it works. And then, so then here, you can see on the bottom there, we did the model reCAPTCHA valid is equal to that verify. So it gives us a Boolean true or false, which in the model you can see there in that line, unless reCAPTCHA valid at the end, it'll throw an error. So we got our badge done. You can see it in the bottom right-hand corner there. We didn't have it set up for localhost at the time I took these photos, so it's not supported. But you can see that little badge would have been there, is there. We had everything set up for it, all set, right? Until you go to an error, and then at this point, what would happen is you would click, and it would, instead of doing the turbo kind of new page render, what it would do is, or like rendering your errors, what it would do is it would give you it would redirect you to a page that said, we are redirecting you with a link to redirect to the next step of the wizard application there. So that's kind of what threw the wrench in the gears there. So we kind of found some stuff on the interwebs to work through, and what we had to do is create a new turbo stream, a new view for it to render, to fall black on the V2 now. So then when the V3 fails, it errors to the V2, so that you can do the clicks on it instead. And then, so with convention, initially how I had it set up as well, which was a big lesson learned for me, was because this was a form being rendered as a partial, I named it the same as the partial, whereas with Turbo, I found out that you have to name it the exact page that you're actually viewing, so not as a partial. So renamed it to the apply turbo stream.erb, and then inside there you can see we created the replace method there with using that replace helper method, and we would use it to call that load reCAPTCHA V2 stimulus controller. So we had to create a new controller with that. Now in the gem, what they'll tell you is, in order to render the V2, that you would use in there the render tags, ERB kind of form inside of your site. But because how your reCAPTCHA V2 has to be rendered explicitly from the to be created stimulus controller, because it will not call the API. Turbo will avoid the page refresh, and then, not rendering, not calling the API, and then move on, is what we found. So then we create our stimulus controller. You throw this code in here to render the reCAPTCHA, which is pretty boilerplate from what I gathered on your API call there, to get it. And then inside your controller now, what you have to do is you have to verify the V2. So you can see the top portion is the original validation from the controller, whereas then we added the V2 verify with parameters passed there. And then you set your reCAPTCHA valid to your model as either V3, or if it falls back onto V2, you can reassign it to the V2 verify. And then now with the error handling in that TurboStream replace view that we had created, we added that bottom line in there to update the error messages for our error handling and our error partial, so that it actually threw that model error that we wanted, and redirected us back to, it didn't move us forward, it kept us on the same page rendering our error. And then once we got that, again, the V2, that's pretty, everybody knows that thing, but we didn't have it set up at the time of the photo shots. But, and then now you can see that our error has rendered on the page. So it was quite the process, kind of interesting work going through there.
How did you get into the error state? How fast are you as a typer?
Pretty slow.
So how did you get to this screenshot then? Did you just like kind of do some manual code to say fail v3 or?
Yeah, correct. So yeah, like I went back and to get that shot, I updated that in the validation. I forget which page it's on. Yeah, right here where it says minimum score. So instead of 0.8, I put in 1.0 and then it automatically fails out is how I got that.
Cool, so then you fall back to easy. Nice.
Yeah, so just a few acknowledgements here for the reCAPTCHA gem by Ambethia there. This Rails devise and reCAPTCHA with Hotwire tutorial helped kind of get a framework for us to work through to kind of get established in getting everything going our way. We had to fine tune a lot of things, obviously. And then also I want to give a shout out to Becky Freeman and Ownify for giving me the opportunity to learn about this stuff and to share with you guys.
Nice. Questions, anybody? Andy?
I don't know the difference between V3 and V2. Like, why go back and forth?
Because of how the error handling happens. So I think with how Turbo, from my understanding, very basic understanding, and I'm totally guessing at this, is that if you have errors with V3, you can't necessarily handle it with Turbo. So you have to fall back to V2 in order to handle that error. And then so basically what it does is now if you fail V2, it just gives you an infinite cycle of doing that.
Pictures of crosswalks.
Yeah, exactly. And boats and motorcycles.
Yeah, I mean, we've all got the memes of like, there's 3 pixels of the bike in the other frame.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But,
yeah.
That's like all I know about reCAPTCHA,
Yeah.
so that's not a great question.
What's the purpose of it for like a business wise? Like, what does it help?
To keep bots from spamming your site and such, but also you get to a point where you start putting in personal information with doing credits checks and things like that and account information.
Oh, geez.
For security reasons.
I think like real common, like a contact form.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of ways to check against bots and spam and stuff, but one way is to use reCAPTCHA. There's other examples, but that's an easy one.
Yeah, you could do like a honeypot field that was hidden and only a bot would fill it out. So as soon as you see email to or whatever, and that's filled out, you're like bot, and you reject. That's another way.
Solve that by using headless browsers to fill out the forms.
They have to pay a little bit more. So
Just a little.
They gotta get really serious about it.
Right. Chris, you have a question?
Yeah, quick question. Has anybody, I mean, besides, I was curious in the room for not just for the speaker, but in the room, but how people's feelings on Hotwire, who else is using it? Anybody, and I'm just curious if anybody's using it extensively. So I've been using it for a little while, and I'm just kind of comparing it, contrasting it to like Vue.js and React, and just seeing if anybody, just curious other thoughts and feelings on it.
So 3 people raised their hands, and I guess mine would be a 4th one.
Yeah, I mean, I have an entire app that's like really a lot of Hotwire. A lot.
How do you feel about it though?
I love it.
You love
I
it?
like Stimulus, I like the whole package. I don't know. Vue.js, I wasn't really a React guy. I don't know.
Is it Vue.js or Vue?
No, so I'm looking for, so if you've had experience with Vue.js, which is pretty enterprise, like Vue is React's counterpart, right? Or React with Redux.
Yeah.
So I mean, the application I put together with Hotwire is pretty extensive, but there's pros and cons to it. And so I'm kind of curious I'm more interested in like some of the cons you've run into that you like versus, the fact that it saves JavaScript and Rails is the easy win. But there is some cons. I'm just kind of curious if people have like just what their interests are from a negative connotation or some of the challenges they've run into with it.
Yeah, I've done both Vue and I'm starting to do some Hotwire stuff. I don't feel like I have my head completely around it. It's definitely a different way of thinking. I like the idea of not having to write a lot of JavaScript and just, server render stuff, but I'm more productive in Vue or React at the moment. So it's kind of, I'm hoping to get there.
Did you do anything else before that?
Yeah, I've done a lot of React. I've done, I guess, combination of web and desktop, React Native. But Well, not a ton of Vue.js, but I'm more at home with Hotwire and the stimulus and the whole package of everything. I think, I buy into that dogma of it's all right here, it just works. And for me, it works great. And I'm like kind of a solo shop right now, so that's another reason why that's helpful. I don't have to context switch so often. But I don't know, I can go down this rabbit hole.
I don't want to get too off tangent, but it is an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
And did you say?
Yeah, we use it a lot. I mean, we only have one JavaScript developer. So anything that we can convert from JavaScript or the old CoffeeScript, we're putting in Hotwire for sure. But we have a lot of complex problems that our React developer wants to go back. He's like, well, this should be React code. And we just, well, no one's going to support that because how are we going to fix it when it's broken? The only other thing I noticed is we have a lot of really deeply embedded turbo frames. So someone hits refresh on the page, they could go way back as opposed to just going back a little bit.
That's a common SPA problem anyways though, right? Because you lose a lot of your history and state.
Right.
I would say there definitely needs to be better documentation. I was looking at Vue.js documentation the other day, and it's just not done.
Vue.js?
For firing Rails, yeah. Which you then, of course, we use your stimulus controller with your Hotwire, and it's not done. It doesn't feel done.
You're talking about, did you say that for Vue or?
For Vue.js itself, for the unintrusive JavaScript.
Yeah, Rails is Vue.js.
The Rails, which you often use in combination with.
The Rails, sorry, I didn't hear you. Talking about the Rails Vue.js, not Vue, UE. Okay.
Not Vue, but you.
Yeah. Sorry, I got it.
No. It's just, I couldn't find any documentation on the Rails.fire method that's worth anything. I had to go read the code, which I'm fine with doing. But, until there's more tutorials, more docs, I think it is kind of hard to get into and figure out how all the different pieces fit together.
Tech docs are hard.
The weirdest thing that I made was that you have, out of all of it getting started, was that you have a template for create and update a lot of times. So you have a create.turbo, whatever the fuck, and you're just not used to doing that. That's literally, to me, the biggest change that took a long time to reprogram my brain. Because I'm been doing it since 1.0 Rails shit.
I had that same thing too. It's
wait, what?
Shouldn't I just be redirecting to show?
Yeah, well, no, it's not how this whole thing works. But it's no, I'm not used to that.
Similar to React hooks and things like that.
Kind of. In terms of learning new paradigm. Yeah, it's fundamentally about learning, breaking the way you're used to doing stuff. You do a create, you do a redirect, or render your new, or your whatever. Same with update. Or delete, I guess. But anyway, just a new way of doing stuff, kind of how REST changed things at the time.
We'll throw back.
Yeah.
I think Monty had a question.
Raised hand?
It went down.
It went down though.
Oh. Any more questions off the call that we missed? Maybe we accidentally covered it.
I'll jump in quick. So Chris, I'll try to answer your question too a little bit. So I think some of you know that I really don't like JavaScript, so I try to stay away from it as much as possible. But I'll put a link in here in the chat for you, Chris. But HTMX is my jam that I've been using lately. I really love it because you stay with a RESTful API design layered on top of hypermedia, and then you're just sending HTML over the wire. But HTMX works as a library in the front end that basically takes that HTML response and then slips it into the DOM. So it makes it really nice because you're just sending HTML back and forth. So you can do server-side rendering in addition to actually having really dynamic, really fast JavaScript AJAX responses where you're updating the DOM as well. It's a thing of beauty. I've been using it pretty heavily and I love it. So
We just need to compare all of these in all of our free time.
Yes.
Great. Any other addendums or thoughts? We'll probably talk about that for the rest of the night, but I'm going to stop recording. Thank you again, Ben.
Yep. Thank you.
That's good.
Yeah.